Shabbat Shalom. Please join me in singing. Yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai lai yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 lai.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, whether you're here in our sanctuary or joining us on our live stream. We are thrilled to celebrate Shabbat with all of you. I've been thinking a lot about how dark it is outside. It feels like today it was dark even before it was supposed to be. And since we are now finished with our holiday of Hanukkah, where we were adding light into our lives each and every night, I'm feeling this darkness even more as we enter into these winter months. So I'd like to share with you a poem, a reading. It's called Take My Hand. When all seems dark and darkness is harsh, take my hands. When I cannot see the light, even in the brightest day, give me your hands. When I am tired and every breath is heavy, take my hands. When my words do not grasp the depth of the yearning in my soul, give me your hands. When my feelings are overwhelming or dulled, take my hand. When I am confused and don't know what to do, give me your hand. So that we may be together, take my hand. So as we enter into Shabbat together this evening, I invite you to think about extending and taking a hand. As we welcome in Shabbat together with the lighting of our Shabbat candles, as we add a little bit of light to our dark world. Page 2.
I invite you to join me in singing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We open our service with our Kabbalah Shabbat section, which is all about the receiving of Shabbat, and it's filled with imagery of love. So as we think about extending our hands out towards others and our community, spreading our love and our light to each other, we'll sing together Yedid Nefesh on page 10, Heart's Delight, Source of Mercy, draw your servant into your arms. I leap like a deer to stand in awe before you.
Yedid Nefesh of Harachaman, Yedid Nefesh of Harachaman, Meshochadcha, Eretz Shonecha, Meshochadcha, Ya la 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 la, Eretz Shonecha, Yedid Nefesh נפשיו הרחמן, ידיד נפשיו הרחמן, בשוכבתך, ארץ שונאך, בשוכבתך, יא לה 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 לה, ארץ שונאך.
We continue with this theme of love as we move to the words of Dodi Lee on the top of page 11. My beloved is mine, and I am my beloved's.
Dodi Lee, vani lo haroeh bashoshanim. Dodi Lee, nizot olah min hamidbar, nizot olah min hamidbar. Dodi Lee, vani lo haroeh bashoshanim. Dodi Lee, libavtini, achoti chala. Libavtini, achoti chala. Dodi Lee, vani lo haroeh bashoshanim. Dodi Lee.
We turn to page 20 as we welcome in our Sabbath bride, the words of Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi, nikrat kala, penei Shabbat Kabbalah. Lecha Dodi, nikrat kala, penei Shabbat Kabbalah. Shamor וזכור בדיבורך, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, ושמו תפארת ולתחילה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת וקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת וקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת קבלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת קבלה. Page 21, verse 9. בואי ושלום עטרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה. תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי Kabbalah.
We're called together as one community in prayer as we continue with the words of Baruch Hu on page 28. Please rise in body or spirit as you feel comfortable.
Yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamevorach le'olam va'ed.
We'll read together on the top of page 33. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. And amidst the struggle, amidst the mystery, we also embrace the oneness that is God, and that we, too, are one. We'll continue on page 34. Shema Yisrael, the declaration that God is one.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
You may be seated. Page 37. Love your God with every heartbeat, with every breath, with every conscious act. Keep in mind these words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work, whether you are tired or you are rested. Let them guide the work of your hands. Keep them in the forefront of your vision. Do not lead them at the doorway of your house or outside your gate. They are reminders to do all of my mitzvot, so that you can be holy for God. I am Adonai, your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai, your God. We turn to page 40 and sing the words of Mi Chamocha, words of hope, freedom, and redemption, words that come from our Torah.
Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Kamocha nedar b'kodesh.
On page 42, the words of Hashkivenu. We pray that God spreads a Shabbat Shalom, a shelter of peace over us, over our community, our family and friends, and over the entire world. We sing these words of hope and peace together.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, l'hamidenu shomrenu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen.
We continue now with the central prayer of Amidah, the standing prayer, Shmona Esrei, the 7 of those benedictions which begin with the blessing of God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. If you're comfortable standing, we rise on page 46, or rise within our own spirit.
Adonai, Sephatai Tiftach Ufi Agi Tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
Together, chanting on page 48.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh ha'akol, V'zocher chazdei avot v'imachot, U'mevi geula livnei v'nechem, Leman shemo be'achava, Melech ozer u'moshia u'magin. Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah.
On page 50, at the bottom of the page, the insert changes for the seasons, and I think for tonight, the winter reading is particularly relevant. So let's read together. You are forever mighty, Adonai. You give life to all. You cause the wind to shift and rain to fall. You sustain life through love, giving life to all. Through great compassion, supporting the fallen, healing the sick, freeing the captive, keeping faith with those who sleep in dust. Who is like you, source of mighty acts, who resembles you, a sovereign, who takes and gives life, causing deliverance to spring up and faithfully giving life to all. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives life to all. Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol. And on page 52, you are holy. Your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Please be seated. And at the top of page 55, as we enter Shabbat, may these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Blessed is the Eternal One, who sanctifies Shabbat. On page 61, the prayer for peace. Again, we read together, if you have a prayer book in front of you. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul. May the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, mevorech et amo Yisrael, Shalom. Let's continue in the prayers of our own hearts, our own thoughts, and meditations.
Page 62, the words of Oseh Shalom, asking peace be brought down for all of us. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, Shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru.
We turn to page 253, offering prayers of healing and well-being, of strength and comfort. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak ve'Yaakov, v'motenu Sarah Rakav v'Rachel v'Leah, hu yavarech v'yarapeh et kol hacholim. May the one who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our mothers Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless all who seek healing and strength, comfort, and love. On this Shabbat, we especially are offering prayers for the Kamilowitz Plager family and other names you wish to share out loud or hold in your heart. Baruch atah Adonai rofeh hacholim, blessed is the one who heals the sick.
Avotenu mikor havracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
So in this, the year of my retirement, we have been looking over ways in which to mark that moment. And one of the ways that I've chosen is to give a sermon once a month on kind of my own spiritual, intellectual, faith development over time. And I realize this is the third one, and I realize that there's been a certain pattern to how they've gone. And they start with what I learned at Hebrew Union College 40 years ago in Cincinnati. And it has at times appeared as if these have been kind of therapy sessions for adult survivors of HUC. That's not my intent in any way. The truth is that at Hebrew Union College, I was given a great foundation of learning, the building blocks on which to build a rabbinate. Yes, it was a somewhat more academic setting, learning history and law, the rationality, the enlightenment, halakha and rituals, how to do things, not necessarily why or meaningfully. The best example was we learned everything about the prayer book. We, at least in that time, in Cincinnati at least, we really didn't experience prayer. We were studying prayer. And so even Shabbat, I would study the texts. I knew what the laws were, where it came from. Shabbat as part of Genesis 1, the seventh day after 6 days of creation. The texts of the Ten Commandments, whether from Exodus or Deuteronomy, keep the Shabbat or observe the Shabbat, remember the Shabbat. We were taught the facts, the rules, the history. All of that was very important, but didn't often give us, or at least me, the opportunity to really delve into the meaning or the power of Shabbat. And so over time, over these past 40 years, I think I have developed a deeper understanding based on that very valuable foundation. I can't put my finger on when I've learned other things or with whom necessarily, and it's not been a linear development. Been piecemeal, over time, opportunities that existed to study with someone or to be with someone or to experience learning, to gain new insights, not only from scholars and from teachers and rabbis. One of the great insights I had was given to me by two young people in the congregation, the two sons of Mark and Tricia Rothschild, when I asked, why do we bless our children by saying, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh, they said they were the first two brothers not to fight. Well, that's a pretty good insight. And learning from a 10-year-old often is some of the best learning you can do. And certainly looking at the text at Genesis 1, at the creation story, the creation starts with tohu vavohu, nothingness, void, messiness, a jumble, undifferentiated, and then God separates day and night, waters and dry land, light and darkness, and then in the end separates the seventh day and calls it holy. Vayichulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzva'am. And the earth and the creation was all done. And the opposite of the tohu vavohu, the messiness of the chaos was order, peace. And Shabbat represented that antidote to the chaos of the beginning of creation. Over time, I've been influenced by the teachings of Mordecai Kaplan and filtered through Rabbi Harold Schulweis or Rabbi Harold Kushner, who took that creation story of God as creator and saw God as artist, as artisan, God as painter or sculptor or author, teaching that God had to know when to stop. And that's what Shabbat is, that the painter could ruin the painting with one more brushstroke, or the sculptor one more chisel, or the author having to know when the final period has to be placed in the book. And that God taught us to stop, to pause, to end our chaotic creation of every day of the week and set that aside. I was taught to look a little carefully at the words when it says, 6 days you shall labor, and the seventh day is a day of rest. Don't forget those commandment of the 6 days. That's a command too. The command of 6 days you shall labor, and the seventh day you shall rest. You shall cease your work. But not work in the way I was taught as a kid. Oh, well, this is all about not having to work hard. So it's not work to turn on a light anymore. It's not work to drive a car. You're not saddling the horse. You're not getting all those toil, task work. But that's not what it's about. It's about not recreating the acts of the first 6 days of doing, acquiring, making. Not turning on light because that was the first day. Not acquiring things, not moving from the private to the public, not dealing with money. All of those things are set aside for the ordinary days of the week. And those days are good days. They're not sacred days. And Shabbat is sacred and set aside. And of all the influences on my thinking, I think probably the most important was Abraham Joshua Heschel in this very thin book, The Sabbath. And I think this book may explain more about Judaism than any other book that I know, because, and many of you have heard me talk about this before, and even entering into the synagogue, we often go back to the idea that Jews sanctify time, not space. And that's the primary lesson of Heschel, that time is sacred, not just space like this. He talks about a palace of time as Shabbat. Sometimes he talked about it as a cathedral of time, and the cathedral of time spoke more to me because I understood that metaphor in a deeper way. I've been able to travel to lots of places, and I've been to the Cathedral of Chartres, and I've been to Notre Dame, and I've been to Mont Saint-Michel. And today, if you were watching the funeral of Senator McCain, it was in the National Cathedral. Now, what happens in the National Cathedral or any of those other cathedrals? You're blown away by the magnificence of the structure. The place changes you when you walk in. You walk in and you are in awe of the height, the light coming through the windows, the way in which somehow this granite, this marble, is able to open up and bring light and brilliance and sometimes stained glass colors into this enormous space. And we are in awe when we are in that cathedral. But not the National Cathedral, but the others, were built in around the 9th and 10th century. Imagine what it was like to live in Chartres or Paris or Mont Saint-Michel in the 9th century, what the people's lives were like. They lived in hovels. There was no light at night. It was a world lit only by fire, as the book says. There was dirt floors, flies. There were no sewage systems. And they lived in despair. And that was the life of the peasant. And yet they would go into this cathedral, and the contrast would be so extraordinary between their everyday lives and the sacred. There were Jews living in Chartres, and in Paris, and in Normandy, and they lived no better than any of the other peasants who lived at the time. But they had no cathedral. They had time. They had the cathedral of Shabbat, time that was set aside that was different from the ordinary life of despair that they lived. Shabbat meant candles and light. It meant a sweet white challah bread. It meant some wine. It meant some songs. It meant hope. And it was as transformative in time as the cathedral was in space. And that image from Heschel's book, The Sabbath, has stayed with me and defined my understanding of Shabbat. But if Shabbat was an escape from impoverishment in the 9th and 10th and 11th century, today it is an escape from excess. It's an escape from too much light, too much noise, too much food and wine and all the things we have. It is a time of simplicity. And that too is sacred. And that's what Shabbat, I think, means. But now I'm going to go another place, which again, in my development, not necessarily linear, but still a change from how I had understood things before. The one thing we did not study in Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati in the 1970s was mysticism. Mysticism was not part of the curriculum. And indeed, it was Heschel who left Cincinnati and Hebrew Union College because he was rejected as a mystic, as Hasidic. But over time, particularly studying in Jerusalem, studying at the Hartman Institute, Malila Hellner, and others, I understood the mystic understanding of the multiple aspects of God. I know everything we learn, Shema, Hear, O Israel, Adonai, our God, Adonai, is one. But in mysticism, God has various aspects, all on kind of a geometry, if you want, that is the aspect of mercy as opposed to the aspect of justice and having to live in balance. God ain't so far away, cannot be understood. God in terms of the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence that is close to us, and so forth. And in those emanations of God, there's also the concept of male and female within God. Now, this is a pretty radical idea. This seems to go completely against our concepts of rational monotheism. But mysticism pushes the envelope of that. It was rejected by certain aspects of Judaism, including Maimonides, but it's still part of Jewish tradition, that God has male and female aspects, and even in the Genesis story, let us make human in our image, male and female, we will create them. Male and female also is part of God. And that when there's a disturbance in the force in the world, if you will, there is a break in the male-femaleness of God. Now, this is very, as they say, heteronormative. It is very much a male-female, although there are other aspects that are not as much, but still that there is a divorce that takes place within God's own being. God's own oneness is broken. And what the mystics want to do, the mystic quest is first to become one with God, the human become one with God, but the second quest is that God becomes one and unified. And if you really are looking very carefully at our prayers, there's a lot of oneness words that want to unite and heal the broken God, if you will. I mean, this is very anthropomorphic and very non-rational and not part of Enlightenment, classical Reform Judaism. But I find it a fascinating insight and metaphor, at least, into the world. And so, how does that fit in with Shabbat? Shabbat is the honeymoon. Shabbat is the time when we want to unite God with us, where we want to have this love relationship. All the songs we sang of Dodi Li, Yedit Nefesh, Lecha Dodi, creating this love relationship between us and God, but at a deeper level, a love relationship within God's own self. Are you following all this? This is a little bit. But that was the mystical understanding. Now, going a little beyond that, there's really eroticism in this story. We're all adults here, and maybe even those who are online are adults, so maybe I can tell you some of the secret, the sod of some of this text, that we read it. Let's take Lecha Dodi. The first verse in Lecha Dodi is, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. Keep and remember in one word. The regular understanding of that is that Shabbat is commanded twice in the Torah, in the Ten Commandments, twice in Exodus and in Deuteronomy. In one place it says, you shall remember Shabbat, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. And the other is Shamor et Yom HaShabbat. So it's 2 times, and so you do both. You remember and you keep. Some people think that the 2 candles are representative of Shamor and Zachor. But I'm sitting on the bima with a grammar scholar, and Zecher and Nekeva, male and female. Zachar is also maleness. There is a place in which I think Shamor is femaleness. And what you're trying to do is create a situation in which the male and the female get together and become unified as one. Not metaphorically, erotically. Truly erotically. And so you can understand why this kind of mysticism was viewed as radical, as heretical by some of the rationalists, certainly. But that God's maleness and God's femaleness could be healed in the brokenness. And that the brokenness of the world reflects that brokenness of God. Now that's radical enough. But actually the mystics went even further. And they said that if we can do certain things on earth, then God's brokenness will be healed in heaven. That human behavior can actually affect God. Some might call that paganism. Or the rituals of trying to have earthly behavior reflected above becomes fertility rites. And in some ways, that is what the mystics who created our Kabbalah Shabbat service really did think. So that when they're singing about the beloved, Yidit Nefesh, or Lecha Dodi, or male and female becoming one, they really meant it. They really thought that if they could heal what was broken, then the world would be healed and at peace and one. Some of this came to me because of September 11th, 20 years ago. On that Friday night after the Tuesday of September 11th, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to address the congregation. And I went to Lecha Dodi, and I'm looking at the words, and it says, "Royal shrine, city of kings, rise up and leave your ravaged state." Then it says, "Lift yourself up, shake off the dust, array yourself in beauty." And it says, "Awake, awake, your light has come. Arise, shine, awake, and sing." And the city of David, the city of Jesse, shall be one again. And I realized that the mystics in the 1500s, sitting in Shabbat, in Safat, in the Galilee, had a memory of a destruction of their world, which was 1492 in Spain. And not dissimilar to post-Holocaust theology, they must have said, what did we do wrong? Why did this happen to us? And how can we make things right? And they saw that God must have had a divorce from them, or as I said earlier, disturbance in the system, in the force, and they wanted to reconnect themselves with God and within God's own self. And so they thought, if we could create a perfect Shabbat that would basically seduce God back into our relationship and seduce God back within God's own relationship of male and female, then the world could be at peace. They still believe this, by the way. I think it's still true, if you were in New York City itself and picked up this morning's New York Times newspaper, at the bottom of the front page, it says, Jewish girls light Shabbat candles at this time. Because if every Jewish woman were to light Shabbat candles once in the time in the world, suddenly, poof, the Messiah would come, the world would be healed. But in the meantime, we take some wine, we turn the lights down, we light some candles, we sing some beautiful songs, we recite some lovely love poetry, erotic poetry, and we recreate this seductive relationship. Oi, if my teachers at HUC would have heard any of this, I never would have been ordained. This is completely contrary to Enlightenment, classical, reform rationality. It is paganism, a fertility cult. Humans can't manipulate the heavens, after all. But what the mystics taught us was passion and joy. There was excitement and intimacy in their idea of Shabbat. And they could be turned on by the experience of Shabbat, and so can we. And in the midst of darkness, despair, brokenness, in the midst of chaos, Shabbat can come and offer us healing. That when we feel we're in the ruined city, we're in the dust, that things are dark, we can shake off that dust and light has come. And so Shabbat is core to Jewish life. It is hope in Jewish life. It is an opportunity for us to discover the passion and the beauty and the blessing of this one day of peace. And it is that hope which I would hope I've shared with you over these years as I've explored my own development and understanding of this sacred time. Shabbat Shalom. Let's continue then on page 282 with the Aleinu. If you're comfortable standing, we rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
On page 287.
ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
On page 291 at the bottom, the words of Hanasenish. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people we have loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. Before I read these names, I want to warn you who do not know of this news that I will be reading the name as well of Oliver Brown Leopold, a young man who grew up in this congregation. We think of all of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. On this Shabbat, we recall especially the beloved memories of those whose yortzites, anniversaries of death occurred during this time and season, and those whose more recent death of these past 30 days of Shloshim is keenly felt by family and friends and community. Call with love beloved memories of John A. Rosenthal, Julius Zizek, Gordon Flegel, Victor Hartman, Ronald Guilford, Eleanor Lieberman, Rose Pollock, Mary Newscable, Sybil Masters, Ted Fenn, Richard R. Boutsen, Helga Weinberg, Samuel Hantman, Viola Bunny Leopold, Helen Schwartz, Cyril Shapiro, Ryan Cohen, Oliver Brown Leopold. Other names you wish to share? Zecher Tzadikim Livracha, may the memory of the righteous be an abiding blessing. On page 294, we say together, Yikadal Yikadash Shemei Rabbah, V'yalmad Yivrach Yerutei V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon V'yumechon V'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, El Zman Kariv V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Leolam Almei Almaya, Yiparach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar V'yitalev V'yithalal, Shemei D'Kedusha Baruchu, Leila Min Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tush B'chata V'nechamata, Da'miram B'yalma V'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mamav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. May the source of peace grant peace to all who mourn, comfort to all who are bereaved. Amen.
Ose Shalom bibromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.